Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It was a crazy week last week. This is Dia McCormick with Alpha Software, and we want to say thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us. What we're going to do today is actually I gave a presentation at the Alpha Developers Conference, and I got some good feedback that I'd like to go ahead and then basically reproduce it here and go through it with your team, because it's one of those fundamental things that people really have if they have a good understanding of the techniques that I show, they tend to be more successful in building the implementations on the mobile platforms. So we're going to go with that. I'm going to start that presentation today. We won't be able to finish it all today because I want to make sure that we leave time open for your fabulous questions. And in fact, if you can take the time now, in the GoToWebinar control panel, there is a questions area. Just go in there and put them in. Dave will be monitoring those and curating them, and we will be doing our best to answer those to you today. So with that, what I'd like to do is, again, thank everybody for coming. I'm going to jump into my presentation. Before I do so, everything coming through loud and clear, David?
Yes, it sure is.
All right, thank you very much. So as I talked about last week, we had an incredible event. I'm still kind of in my mind, oops, let me go over here. Still in my mind, I am still getting a handle around everything that was presented at the event. It was just an incredible event. The density of information was just crazy. It was jam-packed with developer sessions. We were seeing how to do things with the existing technology. We were seeing things that are coming down the road. The roadmap from the development group is amazing. And what we'll do is the next couple of weeks, as we get the information kind of consolidated, we'll come back and share that with everybody. Those presentations and events will be up on our website soon, so you'll be able to get a good flavor for the Alpha Developers Conference and the information that was presented to it. But we also want to follow on with that on our weekly ones to kind of highlight some of the really cool stuff that's in development, and most importantly is to kind of get your head around what's coming so you can plan to start using that in the future. So with that, I'm going to go through today and do the first part of my presentation I gave at the event. And so with that, I'll go ahead and dive into that, and then we'll quickly get into our Q&A format. So first is what the title of it was, card tricks, i.e. how to use panel cards to create interfaces for both primarily mobile but also websites to allow you to do some really cool things and mimic existing design sort of patterns that people are using for their websites. And I'm going to go ahead and give an overview presentation today, and I also have an actual demonstration I'll show you and walk you through the pieces. And again, I found people were very interested in this area, so I want to kind of share that with our weekly Q&A to make sure. So first, I'm going to go through a quick panels refresher today, kind of explaining a little bit about the different concepts around panels, how they're used, how they're manipulated, and there's really two primary different control mechanisms for that. Then the next step is I'm going to talk about docked panels, which is where the magic occurs. It's kind of like the secret sauce to make all of your really cool websites come to life. I'm going to show some built-in examples, and I'm also going to show some, oh, yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, just a quick process thing. Your sound is coming out a little bit compressed or garbled or something like that. I was wondering, do you have another mic or something else that we could use just to see if we can improve the sound just a touch?
Yeah, let me see if I do have that. Bear with me. Hold on one second. Let me give that a try. Yeah, for some reason, I think it just, WebEx doesn't like these mics. There's
okay,
just,
sure.
probably too much going on there. So let me do that real quick. Hold on, everybody, for a moment. Quality assurance has called me onto the factory floor.
I know that happens. At least it's
put up a reprimand card.
It's not Volkswagen, at least, so you're good.
Be careful. Okay, now I've moved to a regular mic. Does that sound any better?
I think that sounds clearer. If the people who wrote in saying that they had an issue with audio, just let me know.
Oh, thank you, and we appreciate it. Give us your feedback and your input, not only your questions, but things we can improve, because we want to make this as beneficial to you as possible. Okay, so where is that? I'm going to go through some built-in examples, and then I'm going to walk through and show you some third-party examples of how you can mimic existing systems out there that are out in the marketplace. And then obviously, as always, Q&A goes there. So let's start with the panel refresher. So the idea behind the panel refresher is that there are two major control mechanisms for displaying panels. And panels, as we've talked about before, are really just holders of content. And that content can be displayed or not displayed depending on the situation. And they're dynamic in nature. But there's two mechanisms that are used to kind of control how we show you the different panels. And they are panel layout and panel navigator. And they really have two different purposes, and we'll walk through that now. So what a panel layout is that you'll have multiple panels that are displayed at one time on the screen, whether that's a desktop screen or a mobile screen or a tablet screen, doesn't matter. But with a big asterisk, some of those panels could be hidden from the user. And we'll come back to that. You'll see how important that is later on. But again, a panel layout is focused around displaying multiple panels at one time and organizing them on the screen to lay them out into a pleasing pattern. Now the second thing is a panel navigator. And a panel navigator is, the concept is you have one panel displayed at one time. And I like to call it monotasking. The idea is you have one piece of content that's on a panel, or one set of content that's on a panel, that's being displayed to the user at one time. Therefore, you don't have multiple panels up there, you just have one, and you're swapping panels in and out to basically deliver what the user needs at that particular point in time. And this is really important on the mobile platform because you notice screen real estate is very expensive. You have a very small screen compared to like now you have like 2 or 3 monitors on your desk. You have a lot of screen real estate. So that screen real estate is very precious on a mobile platform, so therefore you tend to have less content on the screen at one time, and you use a technique of monotasking where you're working on something and then you swap out and move to a different panel and do things along those lines. So the difference again is panel layout is multiple items on the screen at one time. Panel navigator, you have one on at each time. So let me go ahead and show you kind of what it looks like visually. And I'm using some great graphics that Selwyn put together for us here. So the panel layout here, we have basically, you'll notice I have 2 different styles. On the left, we've got 2 panel cards displayed on the screen at one time in a left to right pattern, and they are taking up a certain percentage of the screen. So you'll have the 2 panel cards on the screen at the same time. But conversely, you could also lay it out where you have a top to bottom, where you have 2 panel cards, one on top and one below. And you're not limited to 2 panel cards. You could have many more panel cards. And we'll talk about it in a few minutes. We have a complete nesting capability where you can nest things together. It becomes very, very powerful, especially when you're trying to mimic off-the-shelf systems out there, as we'll show in a future part of this discussion. So a panel layout, you have all the cards on the screen. It's sort of like lay all your cards on the table. Same concept here of having them all on the table, but then you can rearrange them and pattern them how you want depending on the application you're building. Now, a panel navigator, you have a situation where you have multiple panels in your application, but only one panel card is displayed in the panel navigator at one time. And the system will slide things in and out, including animation and other tricks, to take these quote-unquote hidden panel cards and show them to the user at one time. And this allows you some very sophisticated user interface techniques where you can be actually swapping panels in and out dynamically for the user to help them through their business process. Say, looking up information, searching for information, entering data, etc. And again, the focus around the panel navigator was the fact that again, small mobile devices have precious screen real estate, so you don't have the opportunity with a panel layout to put a whole bunch of stuff on the screen. You only have a single piece there. And actually, one of the cool presentations as kind of an aside, was the analyst from Forrester. And this gentleman had started his career as a programmer running teams in the 90s, in the early days, even with mobile, you know, with the initial Windows CE machines and things like that. And he showed that at that time, people tried to replicate that panel layout on the small screen, where you basically had all this density. And it really took a paradigm shift when really the iPhone came out to kind of say, no, 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 you have monotasking, you limit it, but then use cool gestures and dynamic elements to achieve what you want. And for you as a developer, the panel navigator is your magic solution for those kind of mobile applications, although I do want to show you one element there. So that's the difference between a panel layout and a panel navigator. Okay, very important. With anything, you can mix and match and you can combine them. You're not limited to only have one type of thing on your device as you want. And this becomes very, very powerful later on. So here's a great example of it. I have at the top level a panel layout, and that has a very specific structure, left and right. But you'll notice on the left I have panel card number 1, but actually on the right I don't have a panel card, I have another panel layout. So this is the idea where I'm nesting the concepts together. So you'll notice the top level is a panel layout, left to right, and then in there we have the content of a panel card and a panel layout, top to bottom. Then within that second panel layout, which is called panel layout 2, we have the top to bottom piece, and you'll notice then we have a card on top, but check that out. We actually have a navigator as the bottom part of that top to bottom environment. And so again, you can mix and match those pieces. And then you'll notice within the panel navigator 1, which is nested between our inside the 2 panel layouts, we can now use all the power of a panel navigator to swap data in and out of that navigator without having the person move to a different page. So this is really powerful because basically, and we'll show you at the next step, or when I get to that part of my presentation, you can essentially mimic any known website out there using these techniques. It's a matter of sort of analyzing and dissecting that website, and you'll find out very quickly that it dissects into a set of panel cards, panel layouts, and panel navigators. And it's really fun. Once you get the hang of it, you're going to find that you're going to be able to put these together very quickly and be able to produce mimic an existing site in terms of behavior, but also more importantly is provide your clients and your business owners very flexible ways for them to generate and build their websites and their web interfaces. And the other real key benefit of this is that you can get incredible density on your websites, meaning that because you can embed things like panel navigators, now you can have a single page, but you can be swapping dynamically information into that page depending on whether the user makes an interaction or something happens in the system. And that provides you an enormous amount of power to produce extremely powerful interfaces that work very well for the business process for that specific user. So these are very powerful. You can use them as they are. Panel layouts, structuring everything on the page at one time. Panel navigators, swapping things in and out. And most importantly, you can then go and mix and match these pieces together that will allow you to basically create a really complex interface. But to the user, it looks very simple. Things just are there or flip in and out from those standpoint. So don't dispel that they look simple on the surface, but once you start getting into nesting, you can do some incredibly powerful things. Now, what we're going to talk about next, and I'm going to start the presentation now, but I don't want to take too much time because I know we have some fabulous questions out there that are just people are burning to ask and to get answered. What I want to talk about is the core card trick that provides you mobile native-like experiences. And it's a really neat trick. And it's not intuitive to begin with, but once you kind of get the feel for it, then it makes a lot of sense. So let me go ahead and lay the groundwork today, show you some slides here, and then next week we're going to pick it up, and I'm actually going to go ahead and show you in the development environment how to achieve this effect and also how to modify it to produce exactly what you're looking for. The secret sauce for that native mobile-like experience is docked panels. Docked panels are cool. They're different from panels in a panel navigator. They're actually associated with a panel layout, but they're very powerful and they allow you to do some really cool tricks. So what is a docked panel? Well, let's look at the screen here. We have a panel layout, and remember, a panel layout is a fixed set of panels, structured. And as I said before with the asterisk, there's a hidden feature in the panel layout, which is the ability to hide cards. So you can actually hide cards, in this case, panel card number 1. Even though it's part of the panel layout, it's actually inside that. It's actually hidden from the user, so that they don't have that access to it. So when they initially see this, all they're going to see is panel card number 2. So it's somewhat similar to a panel navigator, but it's built for a different reason. The panel navigator is really more around the user controlling, swiping from panel to panel. This is where you, as a developer, can use some trick to have those kind of, think of it as you have an ace up your sleeve. You're at the card table, and you have your cards on the table, or up your sleeve you have that ace, and then you can draw that ace out at any time you need. Hopefully not get shot by, I am in Texas, so we're very wary of that, get shot by the guy on the other side of the table. But you have that kind of tucked up your sleeve, and then when you need it, you can pull it out and use it, and that's the idea behind dock panels. And there's two, and what you can do is you can have two different methods when you show the dock panel, and this is kind of neat. One is it can kind of slide out the left side, it kind of slides out and overlays on top of the existing panel card 2. So it may be a little hard to see there, but you'll notice between panel card and panel card number 2, there's kind of a little kind of hazy area, because the idea is this panel card number 1 is actually sitting on top of the left part of panel card number 2. Or you can bring that dock panel in, and instead of overlaying it, you can kind of scoot the panel card 2 to the side. So therefore, what happens is that the card 2 kind of scoots to the side. And we'll talk a little bit more when I do the demonstration on this, but this is really critical, and this was really well thought out when it was built. Because if you look at the first example on the left-hand side, there's a problem with that, and you can probably guess. What if I have data on the left-hand side of panel card number 2, and I pop panel card number 1 up there, and I obscure that data? Well, that's bad. I mean, then they have to close the first panel card, look at what's underneath it, and reopen it. Whereas with the second methodology, when this slides out, it pushes the panel card number 2 to the right. And when it does that, it does not obscure the data on the bulk of the data in panel card number 2. Now, you may have a situation where data on the right-hand side of panel card number 2 scoots out of vision, but being in the U.S., we tend to have most important data on the left-hand side of the screen. It tends to be the first and foremost you think about when we drive down the street, we're on the left-hand side. And note, if you are in an RTC, right to our RTL country, such as overseas, you can have these docking pieces come out not from the left, from the right, so it can be intuitive for individuals. So example, at the conference, which I love to talk about because one of the most powerful things about the conference is my ability to engage personally with people I've worked with, people I've not worked with, and there's a great developer that I've been working with over off and on who's from Israel, and the Hebrew language is a right-to-left language, and so a lot of capabilities inside Alpha are driven by his requirements to be able to build this. So in the U.S., you kind of think everything is on the left-hand side. When you start working with international deployments, you have to take into account you might have a right-to-left scenario. So again, on this, the important thing to realize on dock panels is they appear, but you can control how those panels appear. Specifically, you can control it, i.e. overlaying the existing panel card, which is on the left-hand side, and then, or alternatively, you can scoot the existing panel card to the side, thus not obscuring the data in that panel card, yet being able to see the new panel card in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off here, because this kind of gives you the basis of it. And it's like same bat channel, same bat time next week. We'll actually dive in to show you how to build an interface with dock panels and then how to control the behavior of those panels coming on the screen. How do you trigger them? How do you tell it how it should appear and the other pieces there? And I think after you see that, you're going to have a huge amount of ammo to go out and really build some very incredible mobile interfaces. And then the last part of this presentation, I'm going to go in and show you how you can mimic some off-the-shelf web systems and actually off-the-shelf applications to produce the same impact that you would see with these other web applications, and show you how you dissect a interface and then turn that into an alpha interface using panel layouts, panel navigators, a mix and match of both of them, and panel cards from there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn that back over to Dave. I hope that gives you a good introduction. Come back next week and we'll actually show you how to do it. And again, we are recording this so that if you if I went by something a little too quick or I missed something or something didn't make exact sense, you can replay that when it's up on our website and be able to see it from there.
Excellent. So we have some questions. The first one is just sort of a comment saying that this person would like to see a demo of how to publish an app in iOS or in Android. So I think that would be a good...
Oh, that's great. In fact, if you don't mind interjecting here, that's not like a 15-minute discussion. And so
that's a full session, yeah.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I had, and I want to share this with the group because you are our extended family, our alpha dysfunctional family, and so we love everybody. You know, we've got Cousin Eddie's out there and some other things like that. So interesting, a number of different people asked me saying, you know, I like your weekly webinars. They tend to be kind of geared for newbies, which we want, you know, kind of people getting on the platform, have specific individual questions, things like that. But they were saying there was a lack of kind of depth in certain areas that really more experienced developers would want to. So David and I kind of spent some time at the developers conference, and we're talking about maybe once a month doing a more deep dive into one particular subject, such as like how to deploy to PhoneGap through that. And it may be me or maybe someone else, but it would be a deeper dive instead of this kind of more shorter piece to go after that. So what would help us out there in the world of alpha developers is what deep dives would you love to see? And so we can start sliding those up. We really don't have the capacity to do that on a weekly basis just because of the amount of time we would need to do a quality job, and we're all about quality in what we would do here. So get us those comments, those ideas. That's a great example, and we've heard of a couple over in the last couple of weeks, and we're going to be working to put together more of a seminar series that people can join that will go into deeper dives for those elements. So thank you very much for those kind of questions, and everybody else, get off your tail and send those questions in to us and those requests for what you'd love to see on that so that we can get our Oompa Loompas working to put these things together for you.
Okay, so and
they are called Oompa Loompas.
They are called Oompa Loompas.
It's a Boston, it's a Massachusetts term.
It's a technical term, yeah.
Of love.
Yeah. So here's a question. Is it currently possible to draw on a captured image using a mobile device built with Alpha Anywhere?
Very good question, and the answer on that is not with the built-in capabilities that Alpha has. Right now you can, if you're an experienced developer, you can purchase. There are a number of third-party plugins that are available for PhoneGap. They give you a lot more power in terms of manipulating images. But if you're not in a hurry, just wait for a little bit, because the new ink control, which was demonstrated at the Alpha Development Conference, that was really Dan Bricklin has been driving that, and the ink control will become a part of our standard mobile platform.
Right.
It has the ability for you to have essentially an image and then dry on top of it. In fact, I think there's a couple of videos out there in the wild that will actually show you where we're going on that. And the really neat thing about that, and this is super cool, is that it is non-destructive, meaning that versus, it's sort of, think of it like layers in Photoshop, if anybody's ever used Photoshop, is that you'll have your background image that's linked to that data set, and then you'll be able to draw on top of it, but that data is actually held separately from the image there. So therefore, you don't destroy the underlying image, and you could have multiple versions of the drawings on top of it, including history information and stuff like that. It's amazingly powerful, and I think we'll have like multiple seminars on how to use all that technology when it hits the street.
So it's
if you're, go ahead.
It's definitely in the works. I have it done, but we just don't have the builders for it. So you can do it in Alpha Anywhere today, but it's going to be much easier very soon. We have the builders. Yep.
But it does really rely on the ink control, if I'm not mistaken. Is that?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So you would need to use the new ink control that's being finalized. But it just kind of elaborate on what Dave said, is that one of the hallmarks of Alpha and the company is they want to make the complex simple, meaning that you look at just even that panel discussion. By laying some panels, hitting a few switches, then you can reproduce something on the mobile instead of spending 2 days writing JavaScript code to do the same thing. That's the same idea here, is that the ink control's there. It works. You can manipulate it. It's in the code, etc. But what Alpha does, the next step, is they're going to be developing genies that allow you to say, oh, okay, we want a ink over image. how can I make that easy for a developer to do it without having them write a lot of code? And so that's kind of the stage the technology is at, is that the underlying new forms capability is all there. They're now working on the supporting elements, that genies and accelerators, that will make it easy for you to embed that into your applications without having to become a professional JavaScript developer.
Excellent. Okay, so next up, we've got a question here. Oh, this person has used linked grids before,
yes.
but they're moving to a UX, and they haven't been able to figure out how to create linked data entry fields.
Okay, linked data entry fields. So
I'm going to go out on a limb and presume that they mean being able to enter data into a relational structure using a UX component.
Yeah, and the way I would approach that is that, when we moved into the mobile paradigm, the grids are extremely powerful, but they were just too heavyweight. They were optimized for a desktop platform. They just were like, I kind of look at it as, and it's kind of mean, so bear with me for all you grid masters and happy grid people. It's like when the, it was the Neanderthals and the next generation. So it's sort of like they were great for the environment at the time. But the problem is the world changes, and especially in technology, the technology changed from a desktop web interface, well, really from a desktop to a desktop web interface to now mobile. And in fact, all the statistics you see say that mobile just continues to chew away at everything. So what we did is we created the list control, and that is going to be your primary vehicle going forward. In fact, there's a lot of work that's in the working on the architecture of that to make it even more flexible. So what you can do is you can use parent-child lists. So much like you had a parent-child grid structure where you had a parent grid and then you had a child grid, you now can have a parent list and a child list, and then within that child list you can also have a detail view for that list, and all of that relational data is connected together and allows you to achieve the same results, but be able to deploy it with a lightweight footprint on a mobile device, and very soon take advantage of all the really cool editors there. Now the other part about that's very important to realize too is that the big difference between the grid control and the list control is that the list control embedded in its capabilities is offline technology, meaning the ability for you to download a data set, manipulate that data set, disconnect it, and then synchronize that data set back to it. And what's great about that is that it actually allows you to do that with a relational structure, i.e. a parent list with children list. So the really cool thing about that you'll find is that you'll be able to have a parent-child or multiple parent-child relationship, edit things at every level of that, and the system will be smart enough to do the tracking of that data when you're disconnected and then synchronizing it back to the relational structure on the server with error checking and conflict tracking and warning the user and all those pieces there. So what you want to look at is look for the list control and the parent-child list. And if you can send us an email, there's a great video that actually Selwyn walks through showing how you can create a parent-child relational list structure that mimics something on the server that can work offline, including editing things at every level of it.
We also have an example of this posted to our GitHub account, and I've pasted the link to that into the chat window, github.com/alphaanywhere/masterdetail. This is a full web project that you can take a look. It uses the Access Northwind table, and it creates the parent-child relationship. And basically, you can go through and see how it was put together. So I've pasted that into the chat window. If you want to grab that project from GitHub, you can go take a look and play with it yourself and see. But as Dion mentions, there's also great videos there in the videos on alphasoftware.com. Mm-hmm.
So you'll be able to do everything you do with a list to a large degree. With a list control, you can do everything you can do with a grid control. There's a few things that grids still do that lists don't, but the list control continues to mature. And especially with the new round, you can create your own editors for lists. I mean, that's the most important thing that's coming down the road, is the ability to not be limited to what we thought you needed, like drop-down boxes and check boxes, and you'll be able to create anything. It's going to be very exciting there. But you'll be able to replicate that capability. And most importantly is when you start transitioning onto lists. And I'm not saying don't use grids. They're phenomenally powerful. You can put to the other things extremely quickly, and I would still use them on desktop web. But if you're going mobile, you really need to invest in ramping your list skills.
Great. One quick question is, when will the editors for this, I guess the mobile optimized forms, the things where the digital link and all that, when will they be available? Answer is quickly, that some of them are available today. If you get the beta keys from us, you need to have an active subscription with us to get those. But you can try out a lot of these new features. There will be some that will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and then after that, it should be no more than a month or two for some of the other ones. I mean, it's the thing we are working on right now full time. So it's that's our focus for our attention are these tablet optimized form editors and mobile optimized form editors. So if you need information about getting beta keys and stuff, just send an email out to guides@alphasoftware.com, and I can get you set up with that. Here is an excellent question, and I like it when people ask these questions just before they start and get themselves in trouble. And so I'm going to read it from start to finish. Says,
I never do that. I wait till I'm knee deep.
So this person's about to start their first Alpha mobile application, and they have an outline of their application sketched out on paper. And they've read that some developers opt to start using wireframes and use the Mac-based Sketch to form wireframes that include images. It says, now with Alpha being a rapid development environment, how do you recommend starting? If they were thinking of using Balsamiq to provide the mock-ups of what they're trying to develop, is this a good start?
I can't endorse your thinking. You're a smart cookie. You are correct, sir. That is, actually, it's interesting. We've been working on a number of new projects and stuff like that, and I find that wireframe is becoming more and more of a critical element, whether it's working with a client or just designing something internally before you pick up, the keyboard, essentially, is the way I like to put it. Yeah. So the intent, and for people who are not familiar with wireframes, let me go ahead and do something like this. Hold on a second here. A wireframe. Let me show you an example of what one looks like here. Let's go ahead and images. Okay, here's a great example of that. Let me go ahead and view that image here. Okay, so this is the concept of a wireframe. In fact, this is for a browser version of a piece of software, the tablet, and the smartphone. And I believe this is Balsamiq. That looks like Balsamiq's fonts in those pieces there. So I find these are incredibly valuable because for two reasons. One is the visual element of wireframes allow you to communicate between two individuals far better than text or discussions or anything. By having it down, people see it and they can truly visualize what it's going to look like on the screen. And therefore, your communication, in fact, I just had a very good experience on this where I was working on a project and there was a very complex process in terms of doing some editing of information. And so instead of going in and creating a prototype real quick in Alpha, we went ahead and built a wireframe. And literally over a period of 2 days, we built a wireframe, ran the process sort of just in our mind and on paper, and then it would be, oh, you know what, we forgot. How would you do this? And therefore, then we tweaked the wireframe, went back, ran the process, boom. Now that that's done, the build can actually start off that. And what I'm finding is because of that, we've only had maybe 5% extra things happen post that, meaning that we still found a couple little things once we actually built the prototype off that wireframe. Now, a couple things about wireframe that I'd like to elaborate on, and this is where we may want to do a deep dive, that overall process, is that wireframes are meant to be not exact replicas of what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. You'll notice that there aren't a lot of really pretty stuff in there. It's sort of meant to be like hand sketched in terms of its behavior. And the reason for that is you don't want to spend a lot of time trying to make it look perfect. You want to mainly look at the structure of your interface, kind of where things are and what buttons are there and there. And some of the wireframe tools are becoming almost rapid prototyping tools in and of themselves. It's pretty interesting there. Now, you mentioned, and I really like Balsamiq. Balsamiq is one that I've used myself. It's very inexpensive. And what's neat about it, too, is that you can use it on the web and allow people to interact on that same wireframe through their web browser during the design process, which is really cool. Another tool I've used is something called Lucidchart. It's more of like a Visio replacement. There's a whole bunch of other ones out there too. There's some dedicated Mac products and other things like that. But one thing I would throw out is that you probably want one that is web-based, and for one primary reason is that web-based allows people to edit the thing essentially. So you can kind of create the first design, send a link to your customer or to your business owner or whoever it happens to be, and they can literally go online and mark it up, change it, put comments on there, and it really accelerates that communication process and that identification process versus if it was like a desktop product, you got to kind of save the file, put it in Dropbox, they open it up there, and it's just not as collaborative in nature. So long-winded, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I'm finding more and more wireframes are one of those cool things that are kind of, they are very powerful even though they seem simple up top. They accelerate the design process because you're talking on a same sheet of paper. Two is when you then go to build the prototype, you tend to have already captured the bulk of the requirements. So therefore, when you do go to build it inside Alpha, you're 90% of the way there, and there's usually a little pieces there, and you're not going back and forth in terms of having to reconstruct your whole interface just because someone thought of something new, so that you don't go into that long churn cycle there. And the other is it's a great tool to then display to outside people to get buy-in in terms of what you're doing beyond the community there in a short period of time. So absolutely, I would start by laying it out. Balsamiq is a great tool to start with. I think you'll find that's probably more than sufficient for everything you need. There are some tools out there that you could literally create an app. It's sort of like a fake app, and those are cool, but the only problem I see with those is you kind of start going away from the concept of kind of sketching, getting the idea out there, and you can almost spend too much time going down that road. So I like to keep it simple. But thank you, that's a really good input and something we've been working on and finding very, very valuable for our projects.
Excellent. Here we have a couple questions. One is, what's the simplest way to set session variables on an A5W page? And how could I use them? All right, here are three different areas that becomes more complicated.
Sure.
How do I use them in a UX component, in XBasic, and in JavaScript?
Okay, so great, session variables. First, what are session variables? And for people who are new to this, I want to spend just a couple minutes on this. Think of session variables as like a global storage of information while you're in a session, a single session with a user. So a user logs on to your Alpha 5 application running on the Alpha 5 application server. When they log in, you can set some session variables. Then you can refer to those session variables anywhere else in your application. They become essentially global for that session, and that's important for you to understand, is that a session variable is for that specific session. So if they log out, those session variables go away. So if you need to persist anything, it's best to either persist it obviously in the database, like let's say you had some profile parameters, you could then edit those, save them into the database, so when they come back in, you can read those out and have them available as session variables. So session variables are very easy to use, and in fact, I'll go ahead and show an A5 page. I'll create a blank page here. Is my screen coming through okay in terms of the development environment?
Yep, it sure is. It's coming through.
Great. I'm sorry, it popped out there. Just again, for people who are newer, I'm on my Web Projects control panel. I clicked New. It allowed me to choose any one of the different capabilities. In this case, I'm going to pick A5W page. I'm going to start with a blank page. Okay? So I now have a blank page. And this is an A5W page. So like if I go, hello, world, it's just like an HTML page. Oh, I must have a different, do I have another one going on there? I must have the other system up there. Hold on, I want to show you this so it works here. Okay, let me go ahead and have to restart it. I must have had it running in the background. Okay, back to where we go, bear with me. So I'll create new, A5W page, blank page. You know what, I must have one in the background, but I'll go ahead and show you how this works. So, you know, if you type in like hello world, it's just like an HTML page, and you see that on the screen. But now I can go into this page, and you'll notice up here there's a button here, and it's called Insert XBasic. And what XBasic is that XBasic is the language. But what you can do is within a A5W page, you can insert it as a script. So like PHP, you know, the scripting language is there. So I'm going to click in here, and it opens up a window here. And then I can just start typing XBasic cards. Like I can say dim hello name is equal to our as C. Name is equal to David. So it's just XBasic. And when I click OK, you'll notice in here that it says hello, and then I've got this little XBasic code. Now, I'm in my editor. If I go to the source down here, you will notice something in here. Oh, did the source go away? Ah, darn. It does that sometime. Oh, not a component. Sorry. Dim name as C. Name is equal to David. Okay, click OK. Yeah, okay. That worked that time. So you'll notice that I did it in there, but you'll notice in here there's these tags. Open bracket %A5, and then there's my XBasic code. So when this runs on the Alpha 5 application server, it gets to here and it says, oh, hey, I see some XBasic. I'm just going to run this script. And so it runs this script and it does whatever it wants to. So it's a very quick and dirty way to put things on there. And it finished, you know, and this was originally how everything was done through scripting and other pieces there. Now, if I want to set a session variable, it is very simple. You just say session dot name is equal to, in this case, name, or I could say Joe, whatever it happens to be. So the trick is session variables always start with session dot, and then the specific name of it. So I could have first name, and I could say session dot last name is equal to Smith. And I could add as many as I want to. Now, when this code runs, it basically creates the session variable. So you notice I didn't have to dimension the session variable, and then it put it in sort of on the server. So the server in the background says, okay, I'm going to hold this for you so if you need it later. So if I want to go, like I can say name is equal to session dot last name, what would happen is when this code ran, it would look up in the session, see if there's a last name there, and if it is, gives that information back to you. Now the cool thing about this is that if I set it on this page, I can now maybe go into, let's go ahead and go back into our web server, well, let me do a recap. So session variables live on the server. They're for the time you're on there. You merely set them, in this case, using some XBasic that says session dot, then variable name is equal to the value. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new web component. And first I'm going to show you a UX, so how you can use this session variable. So now I can go into the server side event on dialog value, initialize, and in here I can say first name, I can go dim first name is equal to or as C, and then I can say first name is equal to session dot first name. Now, if I have set this session variable earlier when they logged in on that A5W page, now this session variable is available, and vice versa. I could say first session dot first name is equal to hello, or let's say it's Jane, okay? And so I'm just kind of using them as global variables for there. So they're accessible anywhere inside your application, so they're really nice from that standpoint. You have to get to know them. They're textual in basis, so there's some other issues around there, but that's the easy way to see them. Now, I want to show you one other thing that's really, really powerful. So per your original question, in a A5W page, you just insert the session setting inside of the A5W scripting, i.e. inserting XBasic into there. Anywhere else, say in UXs, you just need to refer to them from that session variable. And again, it takes care of dimensioning it, etc. Basically, think of session as one big pointer variable that lives on the server. And in that pointer variable, you can set. And you're not limited to just simple text. You could actually put in a whole bunch of JSON. You could do a whole bunch of really cool stuff with session variables. So you can have a lot of flexibility there. Now let me show you one other area which I find is very, very powerful. So let's say we set the, when the person logs in, we set their, let's try this, let's say session.customer ID is equal to 5. And maybe I looked it up or whatever it happens to be, but I'm setting this session variable for the customer ID on this page. So I'm going to go back into my web projects control panel, and actually, let's see if we can make this work, is equal to, oh no, my system will work. So I'll just, like it would be alfkey, the customer ID is alfkey. So I'm going to go back in here, I'm going to create a new, and in this case I'm going to create a grid. Again, after bad mouthing grids, I'm back there. Okay, hit the wrong one. So I'm going to create a grid here. Okay, I'm going to click OK. So I'm going to go to my query here, and I'm going to select, and again, I've got my query here, so I'm going to select where I'm going to get my data from. In this case, something called connection. And then I'm going to select the table, in this case, of customers. And then I'm going to go to fields, and I'm going to show these fields on my thing and do it from there. Okay, pretty straightforward grid stuff. Seen it 1,000 times before. And you'll notice you have this customer ID here. Now this is where it gets really interesting. I can go back to my query. And remember, my query is telling me where am I getting the data for this grid. And what I can do, which is really cool, is what I want to do is I want to pass in to this grid essentially a session variable so that it filters on that customer ID. So let's say you have a system where you have multiple different customers. You can say, oh, I only want to show certain orders for certain people. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into define arguments. Notice I've got my argument creator right here. So I'm going to click insert argument, and I'm going to call it customer ID. And in this case, it's a type character. Okay. And it's asking me, and let me go ahead and shrink this down so it's a little easier for you guys to see here. Okay. You'll notice that this argument is saying, well, where do I get it from? Well, I can get the value from a variable, and now I tell it where I want to get it from. I click there, I click add variable, and I can go session.customer ID. So what that's saying is that when this grid runs, the first thing it's going to do is go look out there and grab the thing session.customer ID, and then it's going to set my argument to be that. So it grabs it out of session, puts it in this argument, and now that argument is available in my system. So again, to show you that really quick, let me make sure I don't go too quick on that, is that first thing I'm going to do is define an argument. I'm going to insert a new one called customer ID, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to get the argument from a variable, and I'm going to define that variable to be session. I could just actually say customer ID and say session variable, and I go okay, okay. And so now I've created that argument, and now I can go down here to filter, and I can say customer ID is equal to customer ID. And notice it's got a special nomenclature that argument starts with the little colon there. So now, I wish I had my server running, but basically what will happen is when this grid runs, it's going to go ahead and look in the session, grab the customer ID that was set there. It's going to set the value of this argument to be that value, and then it's going to filter the row based on that, that argument. So that's how you use session variables throughout your application to limit what people can see in grids, and anytime you're making a query, you can set up those arguments and pass those to them and minimize what people can see from there. So we walked through it. First is the concept of a session variable. It's available on the server during your one session. Again, when you log out, that goes away. So when you log back in, you got to reset up those session variables if you're going to use them later on. So there's a bit of management that you have to think about on that. And that's where you usually use the database to persist that data into it. Secondly, you can now access that session variable anywhere XBasic is at. You know, the card is accepted anywhere. So for instance, you can do it in your server-side events. You can do it in your XBasic functions here. You can actually even do it in things like callbacks. So let's say you've added a callback where a person clicks on a button. Well, when they go into that AJAX callback and runs that function back on the server, and for people who aren't familiar with that, we had a great session on that about 3 weeks ago. You can go through and it'll give you an example of how those things work. I think it was 3 weeks, might have been a little bit farther. You can refer to it during the callback so that it has that session stuff to maybe do a certain filter of a query or look something up or do something along those lines. And the last and probably the most powerful capability off the top, I mean there's many others, is that you can, on your grid components, you can define an argument and populate that argument with that session variable. And then once you have that, you can then go into your filter, refer to that to do filtering of content in grids using that session variable. Very simple, rock solid, works great. You just got to make sure you always set up your session variables, otherwise you get strange results later on. But that's usually pretty straightforward, and you usually set it up once and you're good to go from then on. So that is a quick introduction to session variables, and more importantly, I hope I've answered the question that came up from the individuals, and we appreciate that.
Okay, so another XBasic type of question here, and that has to do with if I've got two columns in a list control in a UX component, and I want to read the values out of those columns and put them into a two-dimensional array, how would I go about doing that?
Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to take a stab at this. Might have to do some thinking after.
This is one of these thinking of it live, I know.
Yeah, kind of thing, and I don't know why it always does that. I must hit the wrong button there. So I'm back in I'm going to go ahead and create a web component, and since we're talking about lists live inside of UX components. So, and for people who are new, the UX component is the equivalent of our form control. I'm going to go ahead and open up this UX component here. There's a bunch of templates, but I'm just going to start with a blank one here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a list control, and I'll call list customers. Now, I could go through and manually do this, but I love Alpha because I have the quick setup genie down here below. So I click there. Oops, am I still coming through okay?
Yes. Yes,
yeah, sorry, my little thing popped, and I wanted to make sure there. So much like we did with the grid, I'm going to select where I'm getting my data from. In this case, my database. I'm going to tell it which table I want, let's say customers. And the field list, I'm just going to pick customer ID and company name. Okay? So I've got my list set up here. I could, if I wanted, put in a detail view, a search part, and set up disconnected operation, but I'm going to keep it very simple for today. So it goes ahead and builds the list control, nothing very exciting on here. And I'm going to go ahead and put that into a panel real quick. I'm going to put that into a panel. And here I'm going to put that, and I'm going to fill that container. I'm going to save this as XBasic list it. So I'll remember that later on. And now I can go into my live preview here. Oh no, it's going to tell me I don't like that. Okay.
Once you just open Task Manager, you should be able to pull that session.
Yeah, I'm going to do that real quick and see. Okay. I must have Alpha running.
Yeah, you have it running twice.
I think there's an old version. I like to run 12 versions at one time, everybody. It's just, when you get experience like me, you want that sense of adventure where nothing works. And just keep going, why the hell does this not work? Okay.
That's working, though. Try live, yeah.
Yeah, and if you have any questions on that, yeah, okay, so I'm going to have to...
give IIS7.
I'm going to get out and get back in right away. Okay, I'm going to call this... Didn't I say that?
Why don't we actually take this, because this is an error that pops up all the time, this port 80 error.
Yeah, let me go ahead and let me show you
how do you change that if you want to use a different port. Because, for example, you're running IIS, it grabs port 80. You don't necessarily want to change that, so you don't have to use 80.
No problem. What you can do, we're going to use this as what they call a teachable moment.
All right.
Which means I failed, thus I need to figure out how to make this look better so I don't look so bad.
All right.
Okay, so I go back to, if I go back to the Web Projects Control Panel, and you go to Tools,
I think they looked at the web. Yep.
Yes. So you go to Web Projects Control Panel, and you go to Web Development Server. Now this is going to be different on the app server. Maybe we can run through that next week and show how to manage that on the app server next week. But when you're working on your development machine, you may have IIS running on your local development machine. So you go into Development Server, and it basically brings up the information here.
So you'll notice that I have right here on the very first the server port. So right now it's set to 80 because I don't have IIS. But often if I do, I just say 8090. And therefore when the server runs on my local machine, then it's running under that port versus 80. So that's all you have to do to change that server port. So if you detect that conflict, what you want to do is open it up and go from there and click Save. Okay.
Except you haven't saved it. You've saved it as 80 again.
Yeah, I resaved it as 80 because I don't want to change it right now.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I guess I could change it right now. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see if this will work. Yeah.
There you go.
I don't want to break anything. Sorry.
All right.
Okay, so why don't we do this? What I want to do is we have our list column get right here. And let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and show you the working preview for that. Okay, so it works in working preview. I just want to be able to show it in my preview. So, and notice, hey, by the way, everybody, that's actually another teachable moment. Is you notice that it works okay in working preview, but notice when I go to live preview, notice what happens. It tells me there's a problem. Okay, and the reason why on that is because working preview uses the built-in like tools inside the development environment. So you're actually not exercising the app server at all. But if you're using live preview, then you're using the app server in terms of what you're doing there. So that needs to have the app server running on your local machine, and thus we have the ability to run, there's a little red button you can run or you can go to web development server and set that up there. And that's why the powerful part about that too is the fact that live preview is more realistic of what you'll see when you have it running on your app server in production, because it's using more of the native stuff instead of in the development environment, sort of trade-offs there. And they're merging over time. We're adding more and more capabilities to the live preview and pieces there. So that's enough for teachable moments. So we have our list here control. And in here, when I run it, basically all it's doing is rendering a list of the two columns, the customer ID and the company name. Okay, so I only have a few minutes here, so let me see how far I can get this. I might have to take up and finish it next week. I don't want to do that there. But so what I want to do on this, and the question, if I'm not mistaken, is you have two columns, and you want to grab the information out of a column and put it into a two-dimensional array, I think it was?
That's right.
Something like that? Okay, so when I'm in the list of customers, do they want to do that on a specific single row or?
Let's go with single row for now.
Okay, I'm going to go for single row for right now. So what I can do right here is, let's go ahead and see how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and in this panel card, I'm going to add a panel header. Okay, and up here I'm going to go ahead and add a button. Okay, and I'm going to call that get column. Okay, so I'll save this here. So we have basically our list of customers, but now I have a panel header. And if I show you what it looks like, you have here and then you have get column. Okay, so now I'm going to go into that button right here. And this is for newer people, bear with us because we're going to dive into a little action JavaScript. Nothing to be scared of. But actually, let me see if I can do it without it. So let me go ahead and list controls. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to try and do it with action JavaScript first. Although the reality is for what they're trying to do, you need to get the data and then you need to manipulate it. So my guess is you're really going to need to use action JavaScript, or I'm sorry, JavaScript with some of our techniques there. But let me go ahead and show you some of this and we can pick it up on the next session. So I'm going to go in here. I've clicked action JavaScript and I'm going to look for list. Okay. And you'll notice in here I have list control actions. And now I can go in here and you'll notice that I have a ton of information that goes on there. So for instance, you could do things like select it, you can do sorts, you can do filters, you can do list detail views, populate things from there. You know what? There's no off-the-shelf one to grab a specific record. So this is what I need to do that. Is instead of using that, I'm going to have to go into here. I'm going to go to text mode. Now I'm in the JavaScript editor. And this is where I can actually add JavaScript. So like if I just wanted to add a little piece of JavaScript where I just said alert hello, okay, now when I work that, it's just going to run that JavaScript in that just like any other because it's all working inside a web browser when it's operating. But instead what I'm going to go back in there And instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and say the following. You'll notice down at the bottom here is that you have different little buttons here. And one of these is great. It's called Insert UX Component Method. So you'll come in here and you'll notice, man, there is a ton of built-in functions already pre-made that work with Alpha technology. It's very rich. I mean, as you can see, we have tons of them. And in fact, part of the problem is there are tons of them. So we're going to look here, and I'm going to say list down here in this filter here, and it's going to start removing or start limiting this based on there. So for instance, I can look down here, and I think there is a get value for the list. Where is that? List, refresh. Oh man, where is that? Phone gap, set value. You know what? I would kind of run out of time, so I hate to leave people hanging here, but basically what I'll do is there's a command in here that I'm trying to get here that it actually allows you to do. There's insert rows, list, dash.
Well, we can definitely. Oh, you
here we
okay, great.
There it is. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and try and finish this part up real quick. So, and we can finish it up next time. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to type list, and you'll notice there's one up here called list get value, list name, control name. Okay. So, and I'm going to go ahead, and what's cool about that is it includes the documentation right here, and down below it has an example. So I'm going to copy this example. I'm going to insert that into it. I'm just going to paste it here. Okay. So I'm going to go customer ID is equal to dialog object.list get value. And am I still coming through okay, David?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. So you'll notice in here it just put some thing in there, but those are not the real ones. So what I can do is click right here, hit the space key, and it pops this up, and I can actually pick from there dynamically list customers. And you'll notice that it types in there all uppercase to name it. Now what I can do is go here and say, well, list control, check it out. It actually is inspecting it and saying, oh, you have a list. It's called list customers, and there's two things called customer ID and company name. So now you'll see, and then the last thing here is row number, and this is where you can then, I'm going to go ahead and just put in 1 for right now, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So long-winded, but what you have here is that you're going to say, put into customer ID, you get the value from list of customers, list the company name, so this is the field name, and this is from row number 1. And then I'm going to go alert customer ID. Okay, so don't freak out, newbies. You don't do this whole lot. This is kind of when you get there. But the important thing to know is that there's an incredible amount of capabilities, so you're never going to get stuck not being able to do something, because you can kind of dive under the covers and do this. So I click save, and let's see what happens here. So I click get column. Oh, it didn't work. I have to figure out why that didn't work. Okay, of course. Let's see. Let me go back and look at my design real quick. So I have list get value, list customers, company name. I wonder if I've got the format there. And again, now I'm going to have to come back. Oh, that should have worked. So alert customer.
Nothing like a live demo.
Yeah, I know.
You know what? We'll get this sorted out. Actually, we have.
Yeah, let me get it sorted out. I think we're really close. I must have a small little thing there. But as you can see, what happens, and just to let you know, is that, and this may give you enough hint to be dangerous, is that in the list you have basically those columns. And very important is that if you come in here and look at all the component methods, there are all these different list things for refreshing list data, getting the values of data, etc. within the system that you can use. So then there's some examples in here also to give you a feel for it. So I'll have to get, I wonder why that.
No problem at all.
I'll have to figure that out.
So anyway, I see one person who it's 2 a.m. their time, and they have a question they want answered. We will get back to you on email. It's actually a pretty good one.
Okay.
But for this, we can finish. We also have a bazillion other questions we didn't get to today, so I know that we have a lot of things. So we can just dive into that next session. One quick thing I wanted to show people about, if I could just grab control of the screen for 1 second. Okay, you seeing my screen now?
There
Dean,
you go. Yes, I can.
great. So you go to www.alphasoftware.com. This is new, by the way, slash video-library. And you're going to get this new video library. And if you go here into this section, one of these table of contents sections here is called webinars. And bang, we'll do webinars, and you will find, here are all the Dion webinars. They're all dated and stuff. Wow, the date looks off, but anyway, this is where you'll find them. So they usually go up in about 1 or 2 days. They make it up into this database. So I'd suggest using this new, instead of videos.alphasoftware.com, which is easy to remember, and you can still get the information there, but this is the new interface, and I suggest you guys use this one instead. So that's it for this session. We have run over time, but thank you very much, everyone who joined us. We look forward to seeing you in another session. Thank you, Dion, for presenting. And we'll see you next Wednesday. In the meantime, send your questions to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. And for Warren out there, we will get you your question ahead of time. Thank you for staying up late with us. So have a good night, and take care, guys. Bye-bye.